Welcome to The Marketing Behind Rapid Growth, the podcast where we explore the strategies, decisions, and growth engines behind some of the world's most successful technology companies. Today we're talking about Twilio. Picture a pitch meeting in 2008. The stock market is cratering. Venture capitalists are pulling back, terrified of writing checks into a collapsing economy. A founder walks in, sits down across from an investor, and instead of opening a slide deck full of market projections, he opens a laptop. He doesn't talk. He codes. Live in real time, he builds an application. And a few minutes later, the investor's own phone rings. Not a demo video. Not a mock-up. His actual phone actually ringing because of code that was written in front of him in that room in that moment. That investor was Fred Wilson of Union Square Ventures. He would later call it the best seed pitch he'd ever seen. The founder was Jeff Lawson, and the company was Twilio. But here's the thing about that story that matters more than the theatrics. The magic wasn't really the live coding. The magic was what the live coding proved, that connecting software to the physical world of phone calls and text messages, something that had always required carriers, contracts, and years of infrastructure build-out, could now be done with 5 lines of code and a credit card. That single insight would become the foundation of one of the most quietly influential growth stories in modern technology. Not because Twilio outmarketed anyone, but because for a long time Twilio barely marketed at all. It just showed up and helped. Let's start with the problem Lawson kept running into. Before Twilio, Lawson had already built and lost a company in the dot-com crash. He'd learned, the hard way, what it felt like to have a good idea trapped behind bad infrastructure. Across his ventures, he kept hitting the same wall. He needed to send a notification. He needed to connect a buyer and a seller over the phone. And every single time, the telecom carriers gave him the same answer. Sure, we can do that. Just give us a few $1 million and a couple of years to build the hardware. For a solo founder or a small team, that answer is a death sentence. It doesn't matter how good your idea is if the infrastructure to build it costs more than your entire company is worth. So Lawson, along with co-founders Evan Cook and John Wolthuis, set out to fix that. Not by building a better sales relationship with the carriers, by eliminating the need for that relationship altogether. Twilio took the sprawling, expensive, bureaucratic world of global telephony and reduced it to an API. A few calls, a bit of code, and suddenly any developer anywhere could make a phone ring or send a text message. That's the founding insight. But the growth story is really about what Twilio chose to do with it. To understand why Twilio's approach was so different, you have to understand what the software industry looked like at the time. For decades, enterprise technology had one dominant sales motion: big software. Massive ERP systems, sprawling CRM platforms, sold in multi-year, multi-million-dollar contracts to CIOs in boardrooms, often sealed with a round of golf. The buyer was an executive. The decision was strategic. The sales cycle was long, formal, and relationship-driven. By around 2010, that world was cracking. Every bank, every retailer, every airline was waking up to a new reality. Their primary customer relationship wasn't happening in a branch or a storefront anymore. It was happening inside a mobile app. And that meant these companies, whether they liked it or not, were becoming software companies. Not buyers of software, builders of it. That shift elevated a group of people who had historically been ignored by enterprise sales teams entirely: developers. While the old guard of telecom vendors kept courting the C-suite, Twilio made a different bet. It skipped the executives and went straight to the people actually writing the code. It's a subtle move, but a profound one. Instead of trying to convince a decision maker that something was possible, Twilio put the tool directly into the hands of the person who would know immediately whether it worked. And that leads to Twilio's first real growth engine: pure utility. The pitch to a developer wasn't a value proposition, it was a challenge. Can you build a working prototype with this in an afternoon? If the answer was yes, Twilio had already won. No procurement process, no sales call, just a developer, a laptop, and a problem that got solved faster than they expected. That bottom-up, land and expand motion is what allowed fast-moving companies like Uber and WhatsApp to adopt Twilio early, specifically because of its speed and simplicity. These weren't companies that got sold to. They were companies that found the tool, used it, and kept using it because it worked. But rapid grassroots growth creates its own problems. and Twilio was about to learn one of the harder lessons in platform business models. Here's the tension. When your product spreads because individual developers love it, you end up with a strange kind of customer relationship. A single company, say, a company as large as Uber, might come to represent a meaningful slice of your total revenue, but the people actually using your product inside that company are deep in the code base. They have no relationship with the executives who signed the checks. There's no account manager, no renewal conversation, just usage. That's fantastic right up until the moment priorities shift. And when a large customer starts focused on cost-cutting rather than experimentation, having no relationship with the people who control the budget becomes a real vulnerability. Twilio learned that lesson directly. Developer love got them in the door. But developer love alone wasn't going to keep them in the building forever. So between roughly 2013 and 2017, Twilio made a deliberate and honestly kind of unglamorous pivot. It stopped only building the features that thrilled developers at 2 in the morning and started investing in the stuff that gets a contract signed. Security, compliance certifications like SOC 2 and ISO 27001. Administrative dashboards, debugging tools built for teams, not just individuals. None of that is exciting. None of it shows up in a flashy demo. But it's the difference between being a clever tool a developer stumbled into and being infrastructure. A Fortune 500 company is willing to bet its business on. This is a pattern worth sitting with for a moment because it shows up again and again in platform companies. The features that win adoption are rarely the same features that win durability. You need both, and you need to know when to shift your investment from one to the other. Now let's talk about the marketing paradox at the heart of Twilio's story, because this is where it gets genuinely interesting. Twilio's most effective marketing barely looked like marketing at all. Developers as a group are famously resistant to sales pitches. They can smell a marketing angle from a mile away, and it tends to make them trust you less, not more. So Twilio's developer marketing team operated under a remarkably simple rule: show up and help with whatever a developer needs. No strings attached. In the early years, that meant Twilio evangelists spending all night at hackathons, sitting on the floor next to a stranger's laptop, helping debug a broken local host setup at 3 in the morning. And here's the detail that really tells you everything. They do this even when the developer wasn't using Twilio's product, even when they were building on a competitor's platform. That's not charity, that's strategy. Because when you're the person who shows up and genuinely helps with no agenda, you become the most trusted person in the room. And trust, for a technical audience, is the only currency that actually converts. The red jackets Twilio evangelists wore became a small, visible symbol of that technical empathy. Not a logo, a signal. As Twilio scaled, that grassroots trust got amplified in a much bolder way. Around its 2016 IPO, commuters in the Bay Area started seeing stark red billboards with just 3 words: ask your developer. Now notice who that message was actually for. It wasn't aimed at developers at all. It was aimed at every executive who had been told one too many times that a digital project would take years to build. It was a brilliant piece of marketing judo. Executives saw the billboard, went back to their office, and asked their own developers, "Hey, is this actually possible?" And the developers, many of whom were already quietly prototyping on Twilio, had the answer ready. Yes, already working. Here's the demo. That single campaign turned years of accumulated developer trust into a boardroom conversation. It didn't create demand. It surfaced demand that already existed and gave it a place to land. The phrase became so central to the company's identity that it later became the title of Jeff Lawson's book. By 2020, the world Twilio operated in had changed again, and Lawson saw it early. Customers were now drowning in data, and their communications were fragmenting across teams. A customer might get a marketing email from one department and a completely contradictory support text from another, with no coordination between the two. The real problem wasn't a lack of channels, it was internal silos. Twilio's answer was its roughly $3.2 billion acquisition of Segment, a company built to unify customer data. The strategic logic was straightforward. Communication channels are only as good as the context behind them. If you don't know who the customer is and what they actually want, sending them a message, however fast or cheap, is just noise with better delivery. That acquisition pushed Twilio toward a bigger vision, a unified customer engagement platform where every interaction is informed by a single coherent understanding of the customer. Today, under CEO Kazima. Ship Chandler and Chief Product Officer Inbal Shani, Twilio is repositioning again, this time for the agentic AI era. The shift is away from rigid, deterministic workflows, the old if this, then that logic, and toward AI agents that can reason and act across channels on their own. Twilio has even turned these tools on itself, using AI agents internally to handle a significant share of its own inbound leads and support requests. The strategic bet now isn't just about sending a message faster, it's about intelligence arriving before the message does, knowing a customer prefers WhatsApp over SMS, knowing they're shopping for shoes, not shirts, knowing all of that before a single word gets drafted. So what can leaders actually take from Twilio's growth story? First, solve for the doers, but plan for the signers. A bottom-up motion, built on genuine product love, is the fastest way to win market share, but it isn't durable on its own. Eventually, you need the security, the compliance, the enterprise trust that turns a prototype into a multi-year contract. Second, follow your customers, not a rigid roadmap. Twilio launched as a voice product. When customers started asking for text messaging, the company followed that demand instead of staying religiously focused on its original feature set. Had Twilio stayed narrow, it would be a fraction of the company it is today. Third, run your marketing like a newsroom, not a campaign. Marketing to a technical audience is slow, incremental, and built on credibility, not slogans. Treating documentation as a real product and content as an ongoing publication rather than a one-off push builds a knowledge base competitors can't easily copy. Fourth, authenticity is the only currency that works with developers. You cannot manipulate a technical audience into loyalty. Any goodwill you earn is a byproduct of actually being useful. A broken product can never be marketed into a good one, but a genuinely great product mostly needs to be shown, not sold. And fifth, commitment is the multiplier. Lawson has reflected that one of his earlier ventures underperformed, in part because he never fully committed to it. The lesson tracks across almost every high-growth company. Real impact tends to require going all in on the hard, unglamorous problems that most people avoid. Twilio's rise wasn't a lucky ride on the mobile boom. It was a patient, deliberate, multi-year execution of a developer-first philosophy, one that used marketing not as persuasion, but as an amplifier for trust that had already been earned. The company today is no longer just a set of APIs for sending texts and making calls. It's infrastructure for coherent, personal, intelligent customer engagement built by a team that understood from the very first live-coded demo that the fastest way to grow is to make something so useful that people can't help but tell each other about it. This was the marketing behind rapid growth. See you in the next episode.